Thanks, everyone, and joining us today for our podcast here at AttackIQ. Hey, Uma, how are you?
Good, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. For those that don't know him, well, first of all, Uma and I were talking about this earlier. He has gone in a year and a half on LinkedIn from having 0 users to 24,000, which should tell you a little bit about this man's expertise. He's the CISO of Prime Healthcare. He's got 20 years in cybersecurity, and so he's a healthcare professional and a cybersecurity professional. So it's a real pleasure to have you on, Uma. So today we want to talk about really the practice of threat-informed defense and how organizations make the most of their cybersecurity investments and achieve real optimization in their business practices and in their teams. And so let's just dive right in with some questions about that, Uma. When you think about cybersecurity management, what are the biggest issues you face when it comes to achieving cybersecurity readiness? And how does a threat-informed defense strategy help you overcome those challenges?
So the number one for me is knowing what we have in the organization, right? And what is its importance to the business. And next is, how do we secure it? Where do we put all our efforts in? So those two drive the whole program, aligning the goals with the organization, to their vision. An organization like Prime, with about 44 hospitals, 300 clinics across 14 states. We have a considerable amount of cybersecurity controls, 50 plus. We buy these tools and put them in place, but how do we know they're working? Right? Because it's always a cat and a mouse game that we are playing in cybersecurity. You're always on a catch-up mode. You're never, you're 10 steps behind an attacker, unfortunately. Right. So how do you make sure your controls that you put in place, process, and people are indeed working towards those goals, right, in securing the organization? So knowing those threats out there and being proactive, meaning before somebody finds out a vulnerability inside your program, it's always better we keep looking for them and filling those gaps. So for me, knowing that where I am weak will make me will get us we'll be ready for any unknowns. For me, that is very important, right? And it has to be done by right skill set. It has to be validated.
And how have you found the MITRE ATT&CK framework to help you in the process? Has it changed your approach to cybersecurity management?
Yes, it did. It did. We were not following this prior to we came across AttackIQ. Once we started looking at AttackIQ, that's when we got familiarized with that framework. We use it internally, to map the threats. Our TI team, threat intelligence team, uses it.
That's awesome. That's good to hear. And what are some of the strategic benefits you've gleaned so far from the process of continuous automated security control validation? Given the breadth of your organization and the number of controls at 50 controls, what are some of the benefits you've achieved so far?
Sure. So, the AttackIQ has been very helpful, right? It has given us a different perspective on what we have in place. How are we, it's not only from the technology point of view, right? People and the process too. We validate with the tool. We don't announce any of these, simulations we do. And when we run these simulations, we come across things that we never thought about or could have imagined that there will be a problem with. It could be the technology people or the process, right? So it has been really helpful in validating all those three.
Can you talk a little bit about the lessons you've gleaned about on the people side? I think the technology side is relatively clear in that, like, if it discovers configuration management problems, but maybe a little bit more on the people and process. What are some of the things you've learned so far, or that you're hoping to learn?
Sure. So when we run these simulations, right, we expect our SOC to detect any of the anomalies that are found either through the logs that we send to the SIM or or other controls in place. That's, and then if they were able to find, if they were able to detect it and respond, right, that's when we tell them, hey, this is just a simulation. Just let it go for now. There are certain certain times that not just the SOC, but certain areas we found some gaps, where the detection went unnoticed, and we were able to right away ask questions, right questions, 5 whys, why, right, and then we were able to quickly turn around and fix it.
Yeah, this is a practice. I think that one of the real benefits of automated security control validation is the investigative process that you do after you find a control failure. It's to say, like, why isn't this working? What happened? And one of the stories that that actually Lewis has told me is Lewis Honor at Bupa has said is that you actually can find that in some cases, if you have an attrition problem, like a control may not have been solved because somebody may have left their role. And because they left their role, they haven't filled out a contract for an MSSP. And then the question becomes, well, why did they leave their job? And one of the things that he discovered is there's a salary suppression problem. And so the security team wasn't actually being paid enough. And so then the human performance function is then, from a manager standpoint, is to then call up the human resource head and say, okay, we need to actually start paying people. So I think it's interesting, these sort of orthogonal benefits that come up from testing that aren't the initial benefit that you'd imagine, but that gives you a chance to improve your performance.
Honestly, we have, my perspective on that is a little different. I wanted a third-party, unbiased opinion in validating the control, right? We don't want a fox to guard the hen house. Right? We want somebody else who has nothing to do with what we are doing and no strings attached to us, who can speak freely and give their opinion and expertise. Because when we work as a team, sometimes we all start thinking in one way, or certain ways, right? We all tune to each other one way or the other psychologically. They speak their voice, right? Their opinion, and they there's more benefit I gain from that from that side. And second, honestly, what you guys provide is, when you compare to the cost, is just a fraction of the cost to what I can hire somebody and get it done. Right? It's a fraction of the cost, but the benefit that we reap out of this is tremendous, right? So that's one reason I went with the Vanguard program, right, where we can, and then we've seen that from time and time again. You guys never left us high and dry. You've been really helpful. The team you have is excellent.
I appreciate that very much. Yeah. So was there something in particular about having a managed security service providing breach and attack simulation from the outside, and being involved as an expert team that has given you any other specific benefits given the novelty of the model in particular that you'd like to surface?
When you're looking at simulating an attack, we can tell you what systems, we can identify random systems in the network and say, hey, these are the things that we're going to do today, right? But we depend heavily on you asking for an advice on, okay, what is it that's happening out there? What's the most exploited attack? Because your team is kept in, abreast of all the newer attack techniques, all the TTPs, the newer TTPs out there, right? You are kept in the loop, and you work with the MITRE framework very closely, right? So we draw that experience from you, right? Even if we were to go hire somebody and do this, I won't find that, at least for us, right? I'm speaking for ourselves. It won't be that effective, I would say. I mean, our teams are involved very much in these activities, but having that extra help, a knowledgeable, team to support you is very valuable. And second, the amount of knowledge, they bring in, and the post activity, right? And the post activity, they will walk us through. Not only they just give you a report and say this is it, right? They will walk you through what the findings are, and they'll help you to validate those findings. Sometimes you find stuff that's not valid, right? Because again, every environment is different. Whatever you find is not always, is a threat, right? But they also help you in that process. See, so for an organization of ours, our size, I believe having a team like this is very helpful.
From a testing standpoint, the traditional model for testing, as we all know, is like penetration testing would happen once or twice a year at max, and they would never test your entire program. And so one of the value propositions that's happening in this category, and it's grown a lot, right? Like there's a lot more companies now than there were 2 years ago, which is great. And to me, that's an indicator that folks are really catching on to this, is that the continuous process of generating data is one of the real valuable elements. And I wonder if you have perceived a cognitive change in your team from that generation of continuous performance data. And if so, how it's changed their approach. Yeah.
Yes, we definitely did. We test our controls, people, process, and procedures on a regular basis now. We don't miss it, right? So whenever we find the gaps, we go back and validate. Not only just validate them, but I request our team to go ahead and update our SOPs, right? Because what you learn is invaluable. Out of the outcome of these exercises is invaluable. You don't just want that to be like one-off thing, right? You want to learn from them and grow, right? Learn and grow. So that's one big thing that comes out of these exercises. I sometimes refer to them as tabletop exercises too, but
of course, right. Yeah.
So it's been invaluable for us, these these simulations that we do on the network.
Is there a cadence of testing and a process, like a structured process that you would like to get to? In other words, like depending on this, you come from a large organization, right? And I think small companies that have like a security staff of 3 to 4 people, they may test their security controls once a month, which I try and tell them is insufficient. Others want to test some controls every hour. Certainly we know once a year is not enough, but it may be that like there are some controls you test every day. There are some you test once a week. And then you mentioned a tabletop exercise. You could also do a sort of larger event where you say, you know what, there's an issue impacting the United States. There's a contingency with Russia. Could there be an issue whereby we have to elevate our security posture, move closer to a higher level in DEF CON or may have you, to do a tabletop exercise that brings in other players? So I'm just wondering strategically how you see those potential evolutions over time in terms of frequency and scope.
Right. So, again, it depends from organization to organization, right? And there are, like you said, Jonathan, there are certain exercises that you pick and choose to do it, as these threats are out there looming, right? You want to pick those and say, okay, this is a high priority and it's actively being exploited. Let's just simulate that on our environment and see what comes out of that. And there are regular exercises that you do on a monthly or a weekly basis, right? We do right now monthly. We don't want to overburden the team, right? See, again, we have to have a balance. If we continuously do it on a weekly basis, we'll come across these things. But again, what are we gaining from that, right? We've discovered 10 things. Now 40, in a month, do we have time to take care of those, to address those, right? Like any audit, I tell our team, finding things is not a big deal, right? But what you do with those is very important, right? If you don't address what you found, what's the use of finding them, spending the effort and time,
Yeah.
right? So we have to balance that. So that's what my message would be on number of times you do or what you do when you find them, right?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, like security, the way that I think about it now. So I worked in the Pentagon for 7 years, and now I've been in the private sector for 3 and doing research. And you think about the number of risks and the things that could go wrong on planet Earth. And if you thought about all of them, you would never sleep. So we have scarce resources, and you have to. One of the things I love about the strategy of a threat-informed defense is twinning it with high-value assets, right? Like you identify your most important assets that you want to protect, you align your controls against them, and then you focus on the threats that you know matter most to you. Right. So I think let's think about it like from a sector-specific area. Is there a way? You're in the healthcare sector, and it faces its own set of unique threats. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you use Vanguard to think about your threat-specific risk strategy. Like, how do you prioritize your approach?
First is knowing what you have on your network, then putting a value on those. Then you go to the next step of, okay, how do we secure these assets, right? How much effort and time and money do we put in securing them and protecting these assets, right? That just doesn't have to be, printers, cameras, or applications, right? It can be people. People too are an asset for an organization. So, we started looking at differently in looking at what is an asset. Like, how do we define an asset? With, Vanguard, right? It helps us, once we know what those assets are, once we decide, okay, we are going after these X number of assets this month. We don't announce what those assets are. We don't announce our activity, when we are doing it, how, what time we are doing. And none of that is announced to anybody, except for one team that does it, right? And then they go after them. It's about 2 teams, but so we go after those, and then once we have those findings, right? That's very crucial for us. We have a call with the Vanguard team, right? Who takes these reports and goes over again, we don't go after all the findings, right? And even,
of course.
Right. And even the simulations, like I said, we take your input before we even run the simulations. We say, these are the things we're planning to run. What do you think, right? And the team comes back and says, okay, let's do this 5 because this is most important, and we see a lot more activity on these, or more, So then we take those. Whatever we both agree upon, the teams, and then we take those, we run those, and then we went over the findings we have. We will go over them together, right? That support is what is needed from an external party, and in this case Vanguard, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What you've just described is it sounds to me like a very collaborative process, and it sounds like it would build team cohesion around your threat-informed defense strategy, give you a sense of prioritization, you'd agree on the threats. And it might also, it sounds like, and I'm not trying to lead the witness too badly, it sounds like it would enable an ability to communicate upward and across the organization about your threat-focused strategy. So you could say to your CEO, you could say to the board, you could say to shareholders, we are taking this approach because we know this threat is after us, or we know that we're concerned about this particular kind of data assurance. And so we just want to assure you. So have you found that it increases the level of confidence and comfort between and amongst teams and leadership?
Yes, it does. I've been very fortunate and I've been very lucky to work with an organization like Prime. They put a lot of trust in us, I've grown with the company. They've given me the opportunity. I started as a programmer in 2001, actually 2002, sorry, when I came to US. We were
Good for you.
Yeah, Prime was one hospital, 10 clinics back then. Now we are 44 hospitals, 300 clinics. We're one of the top 5 for-profit healthcare organizations in the country. They put in a lot of trust in us and the team. So when I heard of the service that you're offering with it, I just didn't even think for a second. I said, let's just take it. I didn't even think for a second. I said, just don't even think about it, just take it. Because not only it will help us to utilize the tool to the fullest extent, but also help us to use the other tools to the fullest extent, right? Because the knowledge that the team brings in is again very, the knowledge they bring in is, will add a lot of value. Again, AttackIQ, not only with Vanguard, we are not only gaining the value from the AttackIQ's tool perspective, but we are also using their knowledge in making the other tools better.
That's awesome.
That's how I look at that. Let's say you have a DLP program and a tool in place. Okay, that's good. But how do you know that it is doing what it is supposed to do? Right? How effectively are we using all that you have put in place? So we get that from the Vanguard program and the AttackIQ tool, right? Not only just that tool your team helps us with, but other areas they help us to get us strong.
Yep. Yeah, we've spent some time thinking about the way you like the return on investment function. In other words, like if you're spending $1 million on security controls, and they're only performing at 25-30% of what they're supposed to be performing at, or some number, like even 50% or 60%, then you're wasting $500,000, right? That's just a number I just made up. So if you spend $100,000 on top of that, or some other number associated, like close to that, for a security control validation process, whatever the number is, then you're having a moderate increase in spending that then enables you to maximize your ROI, that you're otherwise wasting all this money because you have simply no understanding of where your controls are. We just passed the 1-year anniversary of SolarWinds. If I was a member of Congress, I would turn to the U.S. government and I would say, okay, it's been a year. Show me how well you're prepared for those exact tactics and techniques. And I would hope that the government would be able to say, yes, we've run the following tests. But that's where we're trying to get to, is like, sure, you've got a modicum increase in spending to maximize your ROI. And I hope that you're finding that kind of value.
Yes, we are. And one thing we all as a security professionals has to accept and realize is it's a continuous process. It's not a one-time thing. I've started my career as a programmer, and then moved into systems and network administrator and into an architect roles. As a system admin or a network admin, what do? You take a switch, you program a switch, then it's solid sitting there. You don't have to go back and then check it every day or every minute, right? But that's not the case in cybersecurity world. I tell to my team, you need to have a different mindset for it. It's a continuous process. You are always learning and you're growing, right? You're always testing, see how it is doing. And that has to be part of your cybersecurity program. If it is not, then you are failing then and there, right? we can install a network IDS IPS. The IDS IPS out there. Configure it, have the tool up and running and configure it, and then just forget about it, right? You can't do that because the threats and techniques, the exploits out there are changing constantly every second. So as these things happen, you have to catch up. Like I said, it's a cat and a mouse game, right? You're always in the catch up mode. You're trying, you're fine tuning, you're tweaking, you're testing. So that has to be part of your security program. And to realize the like you said, the ROI, right, on any tool, not any tool, every tool, I would say, every control you have in your security program, right, and the people and the process included, it has to be done constantly, monitored, measured, and fixed. It's like a cycle, right? So.
Yep. That's a great way of saying it. I like to think about it like, if, because I worked in the Defense Department, I come from a national security and military planning standpoint. If you'd built the best Navy in the world, the best one, 11 carrier strike groups, which is what we have, maybe coming up on 12, and you had them in port, but you never exercised them ever, the sailors would be, not the fittest guys in the world. You never practiced takeoff and landing. How would you expect to perform against a near-peer adversary? You'd expect the missions would all fail. So the interesting thing is, like, we now have the civilian sector in the United States that's, as the internet has grown from 0 to 4.3 billion users in the same age as Nicki Minaj and Chris Hemsworth, which is 39 years. We now have civilians who are being targeted by criminals and nation states. So it's a little bit of a flipping of the process. And it's probably why so many national security people go into cybersecurity, is this continuous exercise process for the massive investments that have been made is absolutely required, because you have to shift your focus. Like, look at some of the threats in MITRE ATT&CK. You're facing off against, Fin6, like, criminal groups all over the world, or nation states. Like, you have to be ready for these groups, and that requires a certain amount of focus.
Right. So when we first started, you're absolutely right, Jonathan, on that. And when we first started, right, in Prime, I built the program from ground up. We had the closest we had to cybersecurity controls back then was an antivirus. Each hospital had their own installs and a backup program. That's about it, right? That's all we had. So our CIO back then, Shrikant Bhatti, he pushed me into it. What I realized is adding these controls is easy. Keeping up with them, and we, unfortunately, so when we first started, right, I want to tell this story. When we first started in Prime, I won't go much details, but when we first started in Prime, we had a MSSP program for a SOC. Completely they were managing it, maintaining it. We were two security, not security people, but we were two people in the whole cybersecurity managing 14 hospitals. And that miserably failed us. For an organization of our size, going to a SOC didn't make sense to me. And then we built the team internally. But for a program like a Vanguard, I would, in a heartbeat, recommend to people, just get it. It's worth every penny. For what you do, and combining that with your tool is, I can't. I don't use big words. Sorry, but you got my right. What I'm trying to say.
You don't have to, big words. The more letters, the less value the word probably ends up holding. Pith above all else. Now, at AttackIQ, we like to say, we've got your six. And this refers to, in World War II and World War I, fighter pilots. If you imagine a clock, you couldn't see behind you easily. So you had another pilot who would watch the back of you could see the 12 in front of you, but you couldn't see the 6. You couldn't fully turn around. So you had another pilot behind. Is there... Does that phrase resonate in a sense? Because that's kind of what the Vanguard wants to provide. We want to say we've got your 6 when it comes to thinking about, the gaps that you may not be seeing.
Right. That's a very good phrase, and the technique. Or the good phrase that you can definitely say. You not only watch back, right? You watch the other two sides of it too. You're watching. So we are focusing on the business. How do we keep it running in a secured manner by having all these controls? But you are helping us to make sure what we are trying, where we are heading towards, right, is clear, and whatever we have is working, making the way to head towards that goal. I mean, not only you're watching the back, I would say you're watching on the other side too, the other two wings.
That's awesome. I love that. You're building on the phrase. It allows the plane to keep flying straight because you know that there are folks that have your wings. Yep, you're playing your wingman. That's exactly what we want. Are there any other lessons you'd like to offer to your fellow security practitioners as you think about the process of continuous control validation and training and exercising? As someone who's really taken a strategic and forward-looking view on this, is there any other lessons you'd like to offer?
Sure. So I would suggest to make this part of the security program, continuous validation and testing and validation and fixing what it come across it. Right. I would suggest to make this as a security professional, everybody has to make this as part of their security program. Otherwise they are failing in more than one ways, right? I mean, you're blindsided. You're just thinking you're doing right. Everything you're doing is right, but you're probably not. I mean, maybe you probably are doing it, but how do you know for sure, right? How do you have the peace of mind? What I'm doing is right, right? I always think there's multiple ways to do. I mean, there are other ways to do things better than what I do, right? I'm a very proponent of that. I'm not the smartest person in the world. There are people smarter than me out there. So, I'm always trying to learn, and this process helps you learn and grow also. Right, to see what exactly is happening out there. How do we measure with others out there also, right? So, yeah.
That's wonderful. I really appreciate that, Uma. It's an honor to get to partner with you in this process. It's an interesting thing when, like, one of the reasons I joined AttackIQ is it was a new concept. It was solving a problem that I knew had existed when I was in the Defense Department, which is that our weapons platforms and our networks were totally vulnerable to exploitation and attack. And the only way you could determine that and generate data was through automated testing. But it's been so cool in the last 2 years to join folks like you and say, this is a new thing we're trying to do. We've recognized this problem. And there's obviously like a catalytic realization for folks that are in the Vanguard. So actually, you're more in the Vanguard probably than, you're included in the Vanguard, as it were, of folks who are out in front thinking about the issues. So I really appreciate the time, and congrats. You went from us, congrats on being a part of Prime as it grew. I mean, you're a small organization that's now quite big, and you've reached the pinnacle of your security work in the company. That's awesome.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, great.